Okay, so we're bang on time, so let's make a start. I'd like to introduce Karl-Erik Wilson, who is, as the slide says, Corporate GIS Manager at Ocean Winds. I'm sure Carl will add to that, but yeah, over to you, Carl.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I didn't put much in my bio, I'm afraid, but basically I'm a bit of a QGIS enthusiast and a keen hill walker, amongst other things. I work for a company called Ocean Winds, who are a pure play offshore wind farm developer, which means we only make offshore wind. We don't do onshore wind or solar or anything else. It's just offshore wind. We develop, construct, and operate, so throughout the full life cycle of the offshore wind farms. And the company is based in Madrid and is a 50-50 joint venture owned by EDP Renewables and Engie. We have projects across about 8 different geographies. The most significant ones are in Scotland, Moray East and Moray West, 2 rather large offshore wind farms, 950 megawatts and 882 megawatts. We also have the first operational floating wind farm in Portugal, Windfloat Atlantic, and some other assets in Belgium, and a number of projects under construction in France at the moment, and prospects elsewhere. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about initially is just how we're using GIS Ocean Winds. It's quite simple ultimately. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the QGIS Browser, the Database Manager plugin, how those two interact with each other, and what's happening with those. And then I'm going to cover a few of the improvements that we've sponsored by Ocean Winds. So in the offshore wind industry, what we're using GIS for throughout this kind of project life cycle early on, a lot of it is kind of constraints analysis and site selection for our new sites or to infer our offshore lease applications. When we're actually building the projects, then there's a lot of geophysical, geotechnical survey data that comes in from the ships. We use that data for site characterization, for foundation design, and so on. Also seabed management for kind of managing the movement of vessels and what's happening on the seabed. Also used for turbine layout designs, the energy assessment team, export cable routes, onshore and offshore cable routes, inter-array cable routing, land management, acquisition, and just generally making maps. So one of the challenges that we have is that because it's a global business and there are multiple teams, different countries and multiple projects, each one of those is effectively a little silo. Traditionally, each project has been quite their own thing. There's usually a GIS guy in one French project, and maybe there's a contractor in the Belgian one, and all the data is quite disparate and kind of, it's not all in one place, it's not all in one format, and it's not necessarily all been made with one software by the same person. So the project that we kicked off with Aston in 2022 was to help us standardize our approach to this. So basically the idea is just to find all the data, collate it all into Postgres databases. And we're trying to move away from that kind of localized ad hoc approach. We have, I think, 3 Postgres servers all on the Azure platform, chosen purely because that was what corporate IT were happy with. And staff are interacting through QGIS projects saved in the databases. So the data and the QGIS projects are all in the database. They just connect to QGIS, connect to the database and open a QGIS project, and they have everything there. Most of the people who are using this are just viewers, so they're kind of using QGIS as kind of like a web map in a way, but not a web map. And then there's a handful of editors. Usually the GIS person on the project will be the editor for that database. As I mentioned earlier, we work with Aston Technology, who help us kind of get this rolling and give us ongoing support for the database. Also work a lot with Matt Walker for designing database triggers for user management, layer management. He's talking right now, so if you want to see his recording later, he talks a lot about the event triggers that we use, which are really useful. Also working with Lutra Consulting for our new feature requests and QGIS bug fixing, and then we've started recently to work with GeoSolutions to see about a web mapping platform as well. We recently became a large sustaining membership of the QGIS project, so I guess that kind of counts as an announcement, some good news that we managed to put some money back into the QGIS project. It's nice to see our logo on the homepage now. It wasn't easy. But now let me cover some of the history of the various tools available in QGIS to manage your data.
And I'm by no means claiming to be a subject matter expert on this. This is based on conversations with Lucha. I wasn't obviously involved in any of the development of this stuff, but have been recently kind of moving some of these things forward through the new feature requests that we've got Lucha to do for us. So starting in 2008, initially, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but there was the PostGIS Manager plugin designed by Martin from Lucha, and then there was also a Spatial Light one, which was kind of a clone in a way. But basically, you had a separate plugin for managing Spatial Light, separate plugin for managing PostGIS. These tools allowed QGIS users access to some of the management tools you might normally find in something like PGAdmin or dbeaver or whatever, and allow them to kind of work with the data in the sort of QGIS environment. You could now import data from a file into the database easily, create and edit tables, run your SQL queries, preview the geometry and attribute tables, and so on. But ultimately, these kind of early plugins were retired in favor of a new database manager plugin, which is the one that most people are familiar with now. So the database manager plugin was originally a Google Summer of Code project in 2011, which was designed by Giuseppe Succamelli, who was working on Martin Tobias Lucha. And this quickly became a default plugin for QGIS in 2012. This integrated the functionality of the previous two plugins and some other bits and bobs into a single multi-database plugin, with the idea that you would be able to expand it in future to support other database providers as well. This was continually updated up to about 2020 with new features such as the Query Builder, main feature here as well, also support for Oracle Spatial, support for virtual layers, and query history. But ultimately, since 2020, there has not been any further development in the Database Manager plugin, and it's just had maintenance and bug fixes. Effectively, it's been kind of shelved to the side. It's still there. It's still a default plugin, but the core developer community are focusing more on developing the browser instead, because that's a C++ application that's kind of core part of QGIS, and it's quite a lot of overhead to maintain both the Python plugin and the core CC thing if they both kind of do the same thing. A lot of the discussions in that group now are centering about when to kind of just not make it default anymore. You'd still be able to use it, still be there, it just wouldn't be a default plugin anymore. So moving on to the QGIS Browser, again, originally created by Martin and Redeem. It was a standalone C++ application inspired by Art Catalog. I think they were creating a tool for a school in the Czech Republic or something where they just wanted an easy viewer of spatial data. This allowed you to preview your local files and kind of see what it looked like before putting it into QGIS, effectively like Art Catalog in the Esri world. But it didn't have the sort of more advanced database functionality of the database manager. It was very much a simple local viewer. However, this standalone application soon also became available as a dockable widget or panel in QGIS, which gave you the added advantage of being able to preview something and then drag and drop it straight into your QGIS canvas. The standalone version of this was ultimately dropped in QGIS 3. By that point, it also picked up further functionality to browse across various database providers such as Postgres, MySQL, and Spatial Light, which was the precursor to the GeoPackage, and so on. But yeah, so that was standalone version was removed, and we're stuck with what we have the panel today that we still use. So while the actual development of the database management plugin hasn't advanced since 2020, the browser has been continually developed, and there have been dedicated efforts through QGIS enhancement proposals to port over a lot of that advanced database management functionality from the plugin to the browser. And a lot of that came through in 2020, 21. And then from then, there's been a lot more kind of functionality, the ability to save and load your QGIS projects in the database. You can access sheets from a spreadsheet directly from the browser, support for point clouds, field domain management capabilities, ability to create an Esri file database from the browser, and support for dataset relationships and editing those relationships. So basically, the browser is the tool that is now being developed over the plugin. So that brings us up to the current long-term release, 3.40, and since then, kind of inadvertently ended up carrying some of this porting of functionality across to the browser through various feature requests that I've been posting up on GitHub and getting Lucha to implement for us. So I'm going to go through a bunch of new improvements, most of which are ones that we've sponsored, that Jan at Lucha have developed for us. There's a couple that have been also developed by other sponsors. And these are all kind of principally with the Postgres provider in mind. So some of them may also work for other providers I haven't checked. So these cover two main categories. One is the sort of continuation of migrating that functionality from the plugin to the browser. Basically, the idea in the long term is that everything you can do in the plugin, you should be able to do in the browser. And from our perspective, quite like, because we work with Postgres a lot and all the data, the idea of getting all the data in there is an objective of ours. Then making it easier and more intuitive for staff to move things around and manage the data in that environment is a win for us. And then the second thing that we've been focusing on is the ability to kind of manage the QGIS projects in the database a bit more effectively as well. So I'll rattle through a bunch of screenshots of new features. One of the bigger ones here, which is also developed by North Road and sponsored by the City of Canning, is a new import vector layer tool. If you have your Postgres database and you right-click on a schema, there's now a new option, import vector layer, whereby you can load in a layer from your project directly into the database. But what this does, I don't know if does any of you use the refactor tools tool? That's very useful for kind of restructuring a table and renaming attributes and changing the types and so on. You can basically set out the entire structure of your new table based on an existing one, and you can shuffle things around. This new import vector layer tool effectively combines the refactor fields tool and the sort of plugin version of the import vector layer into a single thing, so you can efficiently define the structure of the table you're loading and load it into the database all in one go. You can change all the fields to lowercase, you can put in your primary key, you can filter the data sets and so on, you can reorder you can have the fields in different orders, you can change the data types and so on, and then you can load it into the database. It's very good, just one limitation, it doesn't currently make a spatial index when you load the data in. Other functionality, the ability to shift tables between schemas. This is quite useful for us. We often have like a staging schema where sort of rough work happens, and then maybe somebody else with elevated privileges will be able to move that layer from staging to a different schema. This was a functionality that was originally available in the database manager tool, but you'd have to open up the plugin. You'd have to go through the hierarchical list again. You'd have to click. Now you can just right click on the layer and move it to another schema. Further advanced to this in QGIS 4 that we're looking to develop is just the ability to move multiple tables at the same time. So you can select half a dozen layers and just move them to another schema nice quickly and nice and easily. Editing table comments, another useful thing. We quite like comments. It's quite nice to be able to hover over a layer in the browser and see the comment, usually kind of a low-key metadata effectively, if it's just a one line to say where the data came from and so on. It's useful to have some sort of information to your data sets. Simple one here, just the ability to rename a field. Seems like it should have been there already. It wasn't, so we've added it. The ability to create a spatial index if one's missing. Basically, a lot of this functionality is coming through the sort of right-click menu in the browser. Additional information in the layer information panel on the information widget in the browser. It shows you the privileges that the current user has on that table and shows you whether there is a spatial index or not. A few more features sponsored by the City of Canning and developed by Niall. You can execute SQL from the browser, and within this window there is new functionality in 3.44 for you to save your queries to your profile if you want to reuse them, and you can also save and load your SQL queries to text files as well. Now I'm going to talk about some of the improvements for managing QGIS projects in your browser. But if you ever want to have multi-users working with QGIS projects in your database, the one thing you need to do is make sure that everyone is connecting to the database using the same config ID, so that when they add a layer to the QGIS project, the kind of in the background you have the kind of the bit that describes where the data is. You need the same config ID for everyone to be using it, so that when somebody else loads the QGIS project, it will all come through, because in the background it is relying on that config ID as a reference point for where the data is, or where the authentication is for the data. So there's a lot of new right-click options here. Previously, if you wanted to, thank you, if you wanted to even just delete a project, you'd have to go into the menu. You'd have to go project, save to PostgreSQL. You'd have to select the schema. You have to select the layer, and then you go manage, and you go delete. It's a lot of clicks just to delete the QGIS project. So that's a new option there. You can rename it. You can export it to file. Duplicate it's quite fun. If you've got like one that you use as a template, effectively you could just make a copy and start editing that one straight away. And again, the ability to move your QGIS project from one schema to the next, and in future you'll be able to move multiple QGIS projects between schemas as well. As I was alluding to earlier, the whole workflow was also for saving a QGIS project is quite clunky. Through the main menu, you can now just right click on the schema and save the current project. If you've got a bunch of QGIS projects on file that you want to import into the database en masse, there's going to be a new QGIS project importer, so you can recursively go through a folder looking for all the QGZ files and load them all into the database as well. That being QGIS 4. There will be further support for comments, so you can hover over the QGIS project and you can have a comment about what the QGIS project is, and further metadata will be displayed about the timestamp for when it was edited and so on. And then finally, we're looking at having some sort of lightweight, because the QGIS projects themselves are just a version of XML, I guess it's just text. They're quite lightweight, so we're looking at having a limited kind of versioning functionality for the QGIS projects as well, because if you have multiple users, somebody else opens your QGIS project who's got editor permissions and they make a change and then absentmindedly save over it, and there's no way to go back to the old QGIS project. So, and that, one more thing, if you do have rasters in your database and you have overviews, you can hide those from the layer panel as well, from your browser. Sort of declutters it a little bit. I think that's my last slide. So yeah, there we go. 3 minutes to spare. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Karl. And bang on time or ahead of time. I deliberately allocated myself as session chair to this session, so I get to this talk, and I wasn't disappointed. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I've just got a quick question. Yeah. I'm going to use the session chair privilege and jump in. For it. So does this stuff work with geopackages as well as databases?
Some of it will. I haven't, like I said in the slide there, it's kind of developed with Postgres in mind. I imagine a lot of it will, but to be honest, I haven't tried.
Okay, so we can try it.
I think generally when the developers are doing these things, they put a lot of effort into making them quite general and kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
there are some
expectation would be that it
some
will,
specific. Yeah. I expect some specific things won't work, but others will. So it's a good one to try out when you get the new version of QGIS. Any other questions?
Yeah, questions? Yeah.
So thanks. Sort of fascinating. I had no idea that you could save a huge project file into.
Yeah, it's great.
Database. As a QGC, it's usually the XML project file along with other layers styling. It's actually just a zip file, as I've learned.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do sometimes to save my chops is I edit the XML file.
Yeah. Do that as well.
But how long has this been available? Because I wasn't even aware.
So the ability to save QGIS projects came in QGIS 3.2, so it's quite a while. But it's not. It doesn't have a huge amount of visibility.
No, because I'm still using the Manager plugin. Not anymore.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And if there's things in the Database Manager plugin that you can't do in the browser, then you should write a ticket and flag it up. Maybe we'll pay for it. I don't know.
No, I mean it's easy to separate what's stored in a project, what's stored in your profile, your profile?
So whatever you would normally have in a QGIS project and file, all that gets dumped into a QGIS projects table in the schema of the database that you have it in, and it just works well. So we use it a lot just as a way of having everything in the same place. And if we have a new user on the team, we'll teach them how to use QGIS. We'll give them view only access to the database. They'll connect to the database. They'll see the layers. They'll see the QGIS project. They just open the QGIS project and it's all there.
Yeah, it gets over one of the other big challenges is that you've got a spectral database, fantastic. You're still trying to manage the file system because the project files on the file system. So now you totally avoid that.
Yeah, so trying to get everything in the database basically. With the more broader kind of mission of trying to get everything in the database, it is quite a challenge because a lot of GIS people traditionally kind of very file based, and you've got colleagues who kind of conceptually like, why can't I just move this there? Why can't I just do this? Why is there only one level of folders or schemas or whatever? You know, it's quite hard sometimes to get people on board with that. So the easier it is, the better. And one of the things we did with Aston with the triggers was when you save a layer style to a layer, and then you can just drag the layer in. It's got the style already associated with it, and that's stored in the database as well. There's a trigger there that if you rename the layer, it doesn't break the association with the style. So we can freely move layers between schemas and rename the layers, and it always has the same symbology, which is quite cool as well. So yeah, go and see Matt's recording.
Interesting, because again, in the file system, if you have the layer and then style,
yeah,
layer style file named the same, then it automatically picks up.
You can save multiple styles in the database as well, so you can have multiple styles against the same table. We've also paid for an improvement. You're going to hate me for putting rasters in the database, but I do put some in the database. You can also save raster styles in the database as well. So it's all very useful. And you can tile and overview the rasters. So if they're not huge, it works, and it's in the same place as everything else. So there's kind of a benefit to that in its own right. So, yep.
This is a bit off topic.
Sure.
You might not want to go into too much detail, but you said it was a bit hard to get sign-off to become a supporting member of QGIS.
Yep.
Can I ask you a bit about how you made that case?
Maybe a chat offline.
There's a question over here. So.
Around this slightly related to the style file thing.
Yeah.
I've encountered that having people with different versions of QGIS style files just all fall apart. You can't import someone else's style file. Are the QGIS projects in the database similar? Do you have to have
We centrally manage and deploy all our QGIS versions.
Just repeat the question. So
Sorry, you were asking about different versions of QGIS, basically. Basically, we have 100 plus QGIS users now, and we just centrally deploy through the IT department a new version of QGIS and then remove the old one. So everyone's always on the same version. It didn't used to be like that. It used to have the ghosted machine where the IT guy would manually install each one and so on. But then the IT, basically, a lot of this is working because of how helpful and forthcoming you need the backing from your broader corporate IT team if you want to try to do something like this. And then with regards to permissions for access in the database, a lot of that is offloaded through the kind of ServiceNow ticketing system. So if somebody wants access to a database, I don't have to go into PGAdmin and make it. There is a process now. So a lot of it's also trying to offload a lot of those processes so they don't have to be there for everything.
Any more questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank
Well, I'd also like to add massive kudos to Ocean Winds for fronting up and sponsoring QGIS as a long-term project, but also paying for these improvements, which we all benefit from. So, big round of applause for that on top of the excellent talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.